The problems and merits of Fallout 4 storytelling. Now here is an important hint right away. I'm going to give massive spoilers on Fallout 4. If you haven't played Fallout 4 to at least one ending, and you do not want to be spoiled, stop listening right now. I'm seriously warning you. Almost everything or a lot of things will be revealed. Big spoiler warning, turn away if you have not played Fallout 4. So back to the text. So first off, don't get me wrong, Fallout 4 is a great game, and during the playthrough I had really a lot of fun. If asked, I surely would rate the game with 80 of 100 or so. However, Fallout 4 suffered from a variety of issues, and I think given the many critical comments, it shows that many people share similar views. The most basic point where Fallout 4 is flawed is in the various aspects of story. First, the very premise of the setting is a perspective which is not universally easy to emphasize with. Compare it with Fallout 3. Everyone is the child of a father. Unless you grew up as orphan, everyone can feel how it is to be son or daughter, and what a scar it would be if your father suddenly vanished. We are all children of parents, but we are not all parents of children. Especially if you look at the younger audience, gamers who are 15 or 20 years, they will likely not be fathers or mothers, and today we have many single adults too, so I figure a lot of them, the motivation to have a son and feeling the urge to rescue him may be a difficult thing to emphasize with. But the motivation puts the player in an awkward situation. He has to rescue an apparent minor child and then spends reasonably likely months or years doing arbitrary quests. In short, the identity of the protagonist in a Fallout game has always been that of a lonesome stranger who walks the deserts and does jobs. And that entirely does not fit to the idea of a parent eaten up by the worry of a son about a son presumed to be only a few months old. To me it felt like the parent and me, the lonesome desert ranger, were two entirely different people. The second issue I had with it was how strangely disconnected the main story feels to the world. It is an issue I already saw in Fallout 3. If you compare Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas done by Obsidian, you can clearly see that Bethesda has a lot of merits, but story crafting is not one of them. Fallout New Vegas was, especially in parts of storytelling, the vastly superior game. In Fallout 3, the story around your father always felt disconnected to the ongoings in the capital wasteland. And here, in Fallout 4, it mostly felt the same, despite the factions being present and involved in the world. The big revelation that your son was already 60 years old essentially meant that your quest had failed from the start. You were already 60 years too late, and the only reason you even were there was a whim of your aged son. You couldn't win from the get-go. But then there are the four factions. Yes, they are all very interesting and surely a highlight of the game, but they have their flaws in design too. With each faction beside the Minutemen, I had a difficult time to figure out what they were actually do with the world and how they wanted to change it. For instance, the Railroad never seemed like a real faction to me because, while yes, you can see their goals as either noble or dangerous depending on how you see sins per se, their goal is entirely irrelevant to the overall future, at least in any immediate sense. They just want to free other sins. The fact that they destroy the Institute too in the end, if you side with them, was actually quite a surprise to me. Most of the time I expected they would take over the Institute and create more sins. Why the Railroad would destroy the only source of making more of them was something of a puzzle to me. Personally, I did feel in favor of the sins, though it was likely the most difficult and one of the most interesting moral dilemmas in any games of recent times. Are artificial beings people? Should they be allowed to exist? Or would the risk of them existing and even roaming free be too great? In the end, I decided for the Minutemen, who were in favor of the railroad not hindering them at least. I know all the fiction stories of AI robots taking over the world, so yes, the prospect of letting them free unsettled me a lot. But 3 points convinced me to support them. First, they run away. A being which runs away from its captors proves beyond the shadow of a doubt enough sentience to be accepted as a sentient person. If the Sims were just machines like a toaster, they would not have the desire to be free. You can see that in the Bunker Hill setting. The Sims are mortally afraid. They don't want to be made slaves again. Second, they have the full spectrum of personalities like humans, from Nick Valentine, the coolest and best character in the entire game, to that raider leader, read his computer diary. You see how diverse they are as people, far beyond any programming. And third, none of them developed even remotely into unhuman or overhuman Ubermensch things, which is the big fear humans have with the idea of AI robots. The Sims, once freed, had all the strengths and flaws of any other human being. They can be good or bad, clever or stupid, but they became virtually like human. There is absolutely no sign that they would develop above humans in any way, the way we fear AI to be, mostly since they are defined by the same sort of human body. Somehow I doubt if the Sims were inside an arachnoid or reptiloid body that we would have any inhibitions to just kill them, but they define themselves like we do, by the body they have. They are like a Pinocchio. They desire to be humans, not Ubermenschs. You see, the one storyline outside the main plot which really captured me the most was the Silver Shroud. God, I loved it. The cool costume, the wonderful retro radio stories. I always loved that 1940-50 speech pattern of superhero stories. And being inside of one was the most awesome thing. Can I have a Silver Shroud game, please? Comics, a movie? Anyhow, I was since then almost the entire game walking around in a Silver Shroud costume, beside the last 1 or 2 hours. So that was the identity I adopted. I decided I would become the Silver Shroud in this game, shielding the innocent, judging the guilty, with McCready as my trusting Robin, or some such. Now from that perspective, any genocide was entirely out of the question. Yes, liberating sins on the world does have a risk, but how can we confine, condemn, or even kill a people just because they may be dangerous someday? Isn't that making a travesty of justice? Now that is the entire thing that appalled me so about the Institute. The father always spoke of collateral damage. You know, I read a lot of posts of people who choose the Institute only to be shocked by the ending. I mean, seriously? For me, that had Nazis written all over. We have the better life, the better ideas, and people are just foolish not to accept our superiority. Yes, enslaving sins is maybe not nice, but they are just property we reclaim. Did really nobody else see the relations to black slavery? The Institute justifying sin, slavery, with the same patterns as the slavers who enslaved the blacks? They are not real people. It is a necessary evil to build the lands, yada yada. Collateral damage. Sorry, if you join such a club, the result will logically be that you have to mow down all who oppose, including your friends. You just had to step back and analyze the factions from a viewpoint of psychology, like Poirot analyzes his suspects. Once you look at the Institute, it has genocidal megalomaniac dictators written all over. All is perfect if I become overlord of the world. Well, yes, look at human history, how well that always goes. The Brotherhood of Steel was also out of the question. First, the idea to confine technology simply doesn't work. You can't prevent people from inventing stuff unless you establish a quasi-Nazi-like overlord control over the entire human species. And I guess even the Brotherhood doesn't have the manpower to pull that off. Just seeing there's many helicopters crash was ample proof that they're way over their heads with that agenda. It all sounds so plausible. Take away the dangerous technology, keep humanity locked in a low-tech level. It just has one flaw. It cannot work. You can't possibly lock humanity in any state permanently. Not in terms of technology, hello Brotherhood, and certainly not in any sort of locked up society, hello Institute. So as crappy and kitschy as it sounds, I decided to believe in democracy, freedom, and the good old American way, the Minutemen. It was the only reasonable alternative to go with. Yes, they don't offer a quick and easy way. Yes, they struggle from day to day. But that seems so much more plausible than any other two control-freak factions. That said, it all fell apart when I realized that it doesn't really make any big difference in the actual game. You know, I fantasized for days before making the decision how would the Commonwealth evolve with either faction. I made a break from the game for 3 days, playing other games, taking time to think it through, so in my mind there is a plethora of things that come from either decision, but in the game we see nothing of it. Yes, you can build and defend settlements, and that is nice and dandy. The impact of Institute, Brotherhood, and Railroad on the world during the game is close to zilch, however. So the only visible way to progress the world is by the Minutemen settlement movement. But nothing of that leads to anything tangible, so in the end I felt pretty much in the air. Law-wise, we have to assume that the protagonist spends months or probably years in the Commonwealth, take into account how much he did and how much he honed his skills. You can safely say he spent about 1 or 2 years in that quest overall. During that, the world, however, changed nothing at all. It was what bugged me more and more with each new fallout. We now have 210 years after World War III, and still people in Sanctuary hammering the walls of the derelict houses, and nothing improves. 210 years later, the houses and streets, everything is still like on day one after the bombs dropped. It was realistic for the 80 years after World War III in Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 as well, but after 210 years? And why are people not rebuilding at least some of the houses? No, they prefer to live in ramshackle huts in the middle of nowhere with no possible defense at all. It was what struck me as weird the first time I meet the last Minuteman, Preston. Why did he leave an easy-to-defend town of stone brick buildings in favor of open space of wrecked huts? Why did nobody care to rebuild anything? And don't get me this, oh, but there are too many hostile faction things. Human beings always create some sort of society, and you can see this today, for example, in Libya. The country was a relatively modern country with cities and all in the past until the society collapsed, and today most cities are ruins. But people do not live in each village for itself. They already form factions and control at last some territory. That's what humans do. Even in the dangerous times of the Dark Ages after the collapse of the Roman Empire, people lived in tribes. It wasn't warfare of everyone for himself, because that simply isn't human nature. We form societies. But humanity would not by any stretch of imagination sit in unrepaired ruins, each fending for himself for 210 years and do absolutely nothing. Even the people in the Middle Ages were capable to build city walls of stone to defend their cities, despite the plethora of dangers in those days. But somehow humanity after World War II has lost the skills how to make concrete, or bricks, or hell, even how to make colors. In one quest you have to fetch a bucket of color, because apparently the humans of 2281 lost the knowledge how to make colors. Hell, even the Romans or the Egyptians knew that, without any modern chemistry. But you tell me that humanity, 210 years after World War III, mysteriously lost the mental capacity to discern a way to create dye. Or maybe if they did, why not make it part of the world quest to rebuild and restore such capability? Actually recapturing the cities, filling them with life, decide who gets what house, where which shop is opened, and so forth, instead of the absolutely irrational settlements in the open wilderness which somehow never ever progress since settlers are all too dumb to even repair broken generators and turrets. Yes, it is part of the setting of games that invariably NPCs are imbeciles and the protagonist is the only capable person. I get that. But Fallout 4 is stretching that way too far. You could at least set NPCs to do stuff, like tell one guy in one settlement, okay, you are now the repair dude. The main topic in Fallout has always been, what does humanity recovering after World War III beside your personal navigation through the world? But here, there is no progress, no connection of the factions to the world. Their impact is given solely to the imagination of the player, and I very much prefer to actually see the impact in the game world rather than just imagine it in my mind. I really have a hard time to imagine a Fallout 5 or 6 set in 300 or 400 years after the nuclear holocaust still has the same plausibility with that desert dystopia where humanity is apparently stuck in a day one setting.